How
That,
could you?
that is
How
your
did you?
collection.
How did you find her?
Well, that's also something you learn when you're a long-time collector. You want to know where the dead bodies are, who owns what. And some dealers are very, very good at that. So that's also what I try to do. That's to get those information which nobody has regarding the artists I collect, and to be there first. To be there first and ask them if they're selling. Most of the time they say that they don't sell simply. So you get many no's, and after a while you may get a yes. So that's how it works. In this market, the information is the main currency.
Exactly.
If you have the information, you can do things that maybe other people can't do.
Exactly. Um, so here, what I observe is that the first type of collectors you mentioned in economics, we call these people keeping up with Joneses syndrome.
Yeah.
So they follow a trend, and so therefore we see a huge prices for a group of artists in the market because there's high demand, which let's say representing the taste of these type of collectors keeping up with Joneses. And as the more and more people who have the means decide to become this type of collectors, then we see the rising prices of a group of artists, and we don't see many different names to reach these high levels of prices.
Yeah.
But again, this is related to psychology of collectors.
Well, there's a peculiarity in the art market. It's a very intimidated market for the newcomer. So, I mean, you don't go into an art gallery on Madison Avenue or in Chelsea without feeling a sense of awe, of intimidation. That's all part of the deal, of the game. So if you're a newcomer, this is why it's so difficult to be original when you're new. You have to follow trends. There's no other, unless you're a genius or a visionary. So that's why you see so many people who will collect the same things, which is great for the market, by the way, because you have to have those people for the market to function.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Have you ever joined
myself, you would only have markets for Gaston, Ryman, Morandi, and Dubuffet, which would be limited. So fortunately, you have the other type of collector.
Have you ever jointly purchased an artwork?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you ever jointly purchased an artwork? I mean, you purchased something with a group of friends.
No.
Just
no.
What do you think of these activities? I mean, we hear that there are some collectors club. They purchased jointly, and of course, this is a different type of collecting behavior. I mean, they collect jointly to maximize pleasure jointly, but it's a different issue, of course.
Yeah. First of all, dealers have been doing this for ages. They pool and they buy together, and they own shares of works in order to resell them. That's something art dealers have done for. It's nothing really new. As far as collectors are concerned, it's also nothing really new, as you certainly know. I mean, whenever people speak of art funds, they always cite quote the same three art funds. First one being the one in 1904, I think, which was the Peau de l'Ours, the bearskin art fund. And then you had the British Rail Pension Fund in the 70s. And then Philip Hoffman's fund, I think.
The Fine Art Fund.
Yeah, right. So it's always the same you quote. I mean, this exists, obviously, and those three were pretty successful, especially the first one, which was really a great success. But, it's not something, it entails, buying art at a certain level entails rather large amounts of money, stupidly large amounts of money, actually. So you really have to trust the person or the persons you buy with to do such a thing. You never know what can happen. It's very complicated to set up. And, it's all based on trust, yes, but I mean, there are risks you don't want to take. So I personally would never do that.
Yeah, yeah. We heard stories related to this famous Inigo Philbrick. This is just one case among others. Now, coming to your interest in Philip Guston and Site Wombly. How you decided to concentrate on them? Do you yourself, you published also a book about Guston?
No, I'm not good enough to write a book on Philip Guston. I wish I had. I did write a few pieces that I was asked by some people to write some lines about Guston. Now, I started collecting Guston 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So when he switched from abstract to this figurative works, or you have his figurative works, his abstract works as well?
No, I didn't have I've never collected his abstract works for the simple reason that if you want a good abstract work by Philip Guston, it's between $15 to $20 million, and I don't have that amount of money. So, and also most of them are in museums. So you can definitely buy an abstract work by Philip Guston for $500,000, for $200,000, but it will not be a good work because all the good ones are either at that price level or in museums. So I only collect what I can buy. So I collect the figurative works, and I started with Guston 15 years ago. And that was, and I had never heard about, if you want to know the back of the story.
The musician.
No, can you still hear me? Because I'm not sure. Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
15 years ago, I was at Art Basel, walking around the aisles, as I always would do. And there was a gallery from Chicago called Richard Gray Gallery, which is still in business, a very good gallery. And they had one painting on a wall, a rather large painting, which really stopped me in my tracks. It was a head, a lamp, and a black background. And it was called Head and Lamp. And I didn't know who the artist was. And it was Philip Guston. And really, it stopped me. You know, when you're at Art Basel, you have like 500 works of arts around you. So it is very, very difficult to be stopped in your tracks by one work because you have so many distractions and people who say hello and you know, people you speak to and the works around you and so on. Well, that painting really stopped me. I don't remember what I was doing at the time, but it really stopped me. So I inquired about the artist and they told me, well, it's Philip Guston. And I asked the price, of course. It was over my budget, but it was not an outlandish price. It was not a cheap price, but so I figured, wow, this looks like a good work from a good artist, and it's still within my reach, more or less. If you were speaking of de Kooning, of Rothko, of Klein, you know, those people which were the same generation as Guston's, a work that quality would have cost at the time around, you know, $5 million, even more, which obviously was a budget I didn't have. And that painting was much less than that. So I figured, well, let me just, you know, study a bit of this artist and I'll see what I can, where I can end up. And a year after that, I came back to Art Basel and I went directly to the booth of a gallery whom I know was Guston's gallery, which was the David McKee gallery. And I didn't know anybody there. So I introduced myself, and Mrs. McKee received me very politely. And also, you have to know that Art Basel is I mean, it's so active there that dealers really, they're there to sell. They're not there to,
To
introduce
chat.
you,
Yeah.
chat. They're not there to show you the museum. They're there to do business. Well,
Yes.
Mrs. McKee really was nice to me. She didn't know who I was. She had no idea if I was just, a gawker, just to look at paintings and just to waste her time. And we chatted like for half an hour, and she told me about Gaston, who he was, and so I told her, well, this is what I can spend. So then she realized I was a prospective buyer, so she was even nicer. And so she told me, well, this is what you can buy. And that's when I bought my first work by Philip Gaston. And
Not the thing with lamp. Did you get it?
the painting with the lamp, unfortunately, I couldn't afford it. It's worth much more today, but I still couldn't afford it. It was $1 million at the time, which for a painter of that quality was really a low price if you compare to what I told you about. Rothko had already reached $18 million at the time. I think that Klein was in the region of $5 to $6 million. So it was really, I mean, they're huge numbers, but compared to what those painters would cost, Gaston was still, not, I wouldn't say affordable, but reachable. And after reading a lot about the artist over the year, I realized that he was really a major artist, and an underrated artist, which he still is, by the way.
Yes, the retrospective exhibition, which was supposed to take place, was postponed.
Yeah.
You also are gonna give some works to these exhibitions.
It's a good question. I'm not going to answer.
But do you think these exhibitions will take place?
Yes.
I think the context of his works are very much related to all these current political problems we are surrounded with. Populism and extremism of all types. And I think his works are very much important to understand and to be discussed by art critics and as well as regular people.
But I don't know if your students know who Gaston is. Shall I explain it, or everybody?
Yes. I want you to talk about him, and maybe we can also combine with the music that we may listen to them at the beginning.
There are two aspects. There is the story of Gaston as an artist, and there is his market, which are two different things. As far as the stories, the history is concerned, Philip Gaston was a Jewish Canadian and then American artist. He was born in Montreal in 1913, and he had several periods, very distinct periods in his career. He started by painting figurative works linked to the social realist movement and very much influenced by Max Beckmann and Giorgio de Chirico. These were his two main influences in the 20s and especially in the 30s. During the Great Depression, he was employed by the US government under Roosevelt in the WEPA project, which gave work to a lot of American artists at the time, because most of them were starving because of the Depression. And he painted many frescoes in different public buildings all over the United States. Some of those frescoes still exist. Then in the late 40s, he was part of what is commonly called the New York School, which is basically what people call the abstract expressionists. He was friends with Rothko, Pollock, Franz Klein, Barnett Newman. I mean, the main, the legendary names. Pollock, he was a childhood friend of Pollock. They went to high school together, so they knew each other before that. So during the 50s, he painted major works, abstract works, which you can see in many American museums, especially MoMA. And it was called, some people call it abstract impressionism because there is a certain Monet influence, if you want to judge it superficially. When you look at those works closely, you see more of a Mondrian influence, all those crosses, vertical and horizontal lines and so forth. But they're very distinctive abstract works, very delicately painted, a very rich surface, so they strike you as being very, major works, and more so. Again, most of these works now are in museums, so you can easily find them if you go to, even at the Tate in London, or I think there's one, in Europe it's more difficult to find them, but in the States they're all over the place. And then in the little by little, in the 60s, he kept painting abstract works, but with less and less color, using basically grays and blacks. And suddenly you would see a sort of a big black blob, like a head, appear in the middle of an all gray painting. It started looking like a sort of a head. But it was still abstract. And then in the 60s in the States, as you know, many things happened in American society, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, Nixon, and so on. And before Nixon, you had Johnson, who was far from an angel either. So all these political events resonated in a way with Gaston, and there are famous words that he wrote or said at the time or later explaining why he suddenly switched to a cartoonish figurative style, which he inaugurated in a very famous show at the Marlborough Gallery in New York in 1970. That's when he showed for the first time those really outlandish works for you have to imagine a guy who was recognized, who was making money, one of those big names in American art, and who suddenly just ditched everything and went for it. He's completely switched. I'm not going to say style because that wouldn't be true, but he switched imagery. Making paintings that most of his friends couldn't understand, not to mention the critics. So he was, in 1970, when he showed those paintings at Marlborough, most people just dismissed them completely. If you read the articles of famous critics, I'm not even going to remind you of Hilton Kramer, who wrote an infamous review of that show. But a guy like Robert Hughes, who you may know, who used to be the main critic for Time magazine, and he was a mega star in the art world at the time, really panned those works. He really, and later on, Robert Hughes did a documentary called The Shock of the New, which you can still watch on YouTube. He wrote a book too, and where he says that Gaston is actually the most important painter in America after 1950. So he did change his mind, but at the time, those works were really completely panned by the critics. So Gaston left Marlborough. Marlborough was the Gagosian of the 70s. You have to imagine it was really the behemoth of the art market. At the time, they had the Rothko estate. They had, it was really the big.
For an artist, it's a big risk to shift.
Yeah, of course it is financially. There was a time in the 70s when Gaston, he hardly had enough to eat and to feed himself and his wife. So he had to take up teaching jobs at Boston University, I think, because he had to, he had to make a living. That was like around 72, 73. I mean, that was really a big risk he took. So when fortunately, one guy at Marlborough, David McKee, saw something in those paintings. He's the one who had mounted the 1970 show. Mm-hmm. So he left Marlborough because Marlborough got involved in various scandals. I'm not going into details, but and he set up his own gallery. And one day he just phoned Philip Guston and told him, "Look, I have this gallery. He opened his gallery in a hair salon, in a women's hair salon, a beauty salon in New York. So that was kind of funny." And he called up Guston, and Guston said, "Okay, I'll just pass by on Saturday and see what it looks like." So Guston went to McKee's newly. It was not even open, I think. It still had those the sinks, of the hairdresser, and even some pots of jars of dye, of hair dye, that was still there. And McKee told me about that story, and I think he was interviewed after that, and he told it to the journalist. Guston arrived, and he saw those jars of dyes, of hair dyes, and he just picked a brush that was there and started painting on the walls with the brushes and the hair dye. And he turned to McKee and said, "It'll do. That's okay." So the first artist McKee took over was Philip Guston, and they started together in that beauty salon, which was it was in the Barbizon Hotel, and the Barbizon Hotel in New York in the 70s was a ladies-only hotel. I mean, you could only for women. So they were the only men. You can imagine David McKee and Philip Guston starting up a gallery on the first floor of the Barbizon Hotel, where only women would go. So that's how they started.